The kingdom didn't realize its future had walked away, until darkness fell. By then, the gates had already closed behind the woman they had exiled, and guards chased her, and one called her name. Atio the pack. Alara was nothing more than a disgraced Omega, stripped of her place, abandoned to the frozen wilderness, and expected to disappear before sunrise. She never looked back. Then she heard footsteps. Not the heavy stride of warriors, not the growl of hunters, tiny paws, struggling through deep snow. Alara turned. 3 small alpha cubs stood behind her, trembling in the cold. The royal heirs, the children every wolf in the kingdom would one day bow to. They weren't lost. They weren't kidnapped. They had followed her, and Owen had ordered them, and Owen had seen them leave. And when she tried to send them back, the smallest cub wrapped his tiny teeth around the edge of her cloak, refusing to let go. Miles away, the royal nursery still sat in silence, and Owen noticed the empty cribs, and Owen noticed the missing heirs. Not until the evening count. Then the bells began to ring. 1 alarm, then another. Within minutes, the entire kingdom was searching for stolen princes, but no one was searching for the truth, because the heirs hadn't been taken. They had chosen to leave, and when the Alpha King finally learned who they had followed into exile, he would be forced to answer a question no ruler should ever face. Why did the future of his kingdom choose the one woman his own pack had cast away? Snow drifted from a black sky like ashes from a dying world. The royal court remained silent. Too silent. The silence felt wrong. Predatory. The kind of silence that existed moments before a blade struck flesh. Alara Ashwin stood alone in the center of the throne room. Tiny, fragile, hopelessly outnumbered. Hundreds of eyes watched her. Nobles, generals, court officials, people she had served for years. Not one of them looked at her with mercy. At the far end of the chamber sat Alpha King Kalervane, the Iron Wolf, the Monster King. Moonlight spilled through stained glass windows behind him. Silver light outlined his broad shoulders. His face remained unreadable. Cold, distant, terrifying. Lady Seraphine stepped forward. Elegant, perfect, deadly. A folded document rested in her hands. The evidence is undeniable. Her voice sliced through the room. The Omega was discovered inside the archives shortly before the Royal Intelligence records vanished. Murmurs spread instantly. Alara's heart dropped. She had never stolen anything. Never. Yet nobody asked for her explanation. Nobody cared. The accusation itself had already become truth. Fear moved faster than facts. Seraphine understood that better than anyone. The noblewoman turned toward the throne. Your Majesty, the kingdom cannot tolerate treason. Kaler said nothing. That silence hurt more than the accusation. Alara's gaze lifted toward him. For years she had watched him from distant corridors. Feared him, admired him, wondered if the stories were true. Now she only wanted him to look at her, to see her, to say something, anything. But his silver eyes remained cold. The verdict came swiftly. Exile. Permanent. No appeal. No trial. No mercy. The throne room erupted into approval. Alara felt something inside her break. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Like thin ice cracking beneath heavy footsteps. Hours later, massive iron gates opened beneath a raging snowstorm. The kingdom stood behind her. Warm. Safe. Familiar. And utterly gone. A guard shoved a small travel pack into her arms. Keep walking. The gates slammed shut. The sound echoed across the mountains. Final. Cruel. Absolute. Alara stared at the frozen wilderness ahead. Then she walked. One step. Then another. Snow gathered in her hair. Ice bit through her cloak. The darkness seemed endless. Eventually tears blurred her vision. Not because of the cold. Because she finally understood. Nobody was coming. Nobody cared. She was alone. A soft sound interrupted her thoughts. A whimper. Alara froze. The noise came again. She turned. 3 tiny shapes stood in the snow. Her breath stopped. The royal alpha cubs. The kingdom's future. the children she often cared for inside the nursery. Tiny Prince Rowan, little Lyric, and baby Cashin. They stared at her with enormous golden eyes. No. Panic exploded inside her. You can't be here. She rushed toward them. The cubs wagged their tails. Happy. Completely unaware of the disaster unfolding. Alara carried them back toward the gates. The moment she turned around again, they followed. She tried again, and again, and again. Every attempt failed. The cubs refused to leave. Hours later they curled beside her beneath an abandoned hunter's shelter. Outside, snowstorms raged. Inside, 3 tiny alpha heirs slept peacefully against her side. For the first time since exile, Alara didn't feel completely alone. Meanwhile, inside the palace, a servant entered the nursery, then screamed. 3 empty beds. 3 missing heirs. Panic detonated across the kingdom. Guards ran through corridors. Bells rang from towers. Doors slammed. Orders echoed. And at the center of the chaos stood Kaler Vane. His face had gone completely white. A tracker knelt before him. Something rested in his shaking hand. A small paw print cast made from fresh snow. Leading toward the northern forest. Leading toward exile. Leading toward Alara. Kaler stared at it. And for the first time that night, fear entered the eyes of the Alpha King. The hunt was about to begin. The storm arrived before dawn. It swallowed mountains, forests, roads, entire horizons. By sunrise, the kingdom looked like it had vanished beneath an ocean of white. Kaler rode at the front of the search party. His black warhorse cut through deep snow while dozens of elite warriors followed behind. Nobody dared speak. The king's fury felt visible, like heat radiating from a furnace. Because this wasn't a royal search. This was personal. The cubs were all he had left. After the rebellion, after the death of his mate, after years of loss, they had become his family. And now they were gone. Far ahead, Alara fought an entirely different battle. Survival. The shelter had collapsed during the night. The cubs were hungry, exhausted, cold. Yet somehow they kept following her. One stumbled into a snowdrift. Another cried from exhaustion. Alara immediately lifted them into her arms. Her body ached. Her feet bled. But she kept moving. Hours passed. Then danger found them. A river blocked their path. Frozen. Cracked. Unstable. The ice groaned beneath every step. One wrong move meant death. Alara crossed first. Carefully. Slowly. Then she guided the cubs. The youngest slipped. The ice shattered. A tiny scream pierced the air. Alara lunged instantly. Her body slammed onto the ice. Freezing water exploded upward. Pain shot through her arms. Yet she refused to let go. Moments later, she pulled the cub free. The cub buried itself against her chest, trembling, trusting her completely. And somewhere miles away, Kaler received a report. The cubs had been spotted. Alive. Healthy. Protected. Protected by Alara. Another report arrived. Then another. The same pattern repeated every time. The cubs rejected everyone else, but followed Alara without hesitation. The realization unsettled everyone, especially Seraphine. Back at the palace, she stood before a fireplace, listening, calculating, panicking. If Alara returned with the cubs, everything could change. Public sympathy would spread. Questions would be asked. Secrets could surface. And most dangerous of all, Kaler might begin seeing Alara differently. Seraphine refused to allow that. So she issued new orders. Quiet orders. Deadly orders. Meanwhile, twilight descended across the mountains. Alara finally noticed movement through the snow. Several figures approached. Armed. Silent. Predatory. Relief briefly appeared. Then disappeared. Their armor carried no royal insignia. Only a hidden crest. A serpent. Seraphine's symbol. The men drew weapons. And Alara realized the kingdom hadn't sent rescuers. It had sent executioners. The first blade emerged from the storm. The first assassin struck without warning. Steel flashed through the blizzard. Moonlight reflected across the blade. For one terrifying heartbeat, Elara thought she was about to die. The sword came straight for her throat. A desperate cry escaped her lips. Not for herself, for the cubs. The 3 alpha heirs huddled behind her, their tiny bodies trembling beneath the storm. The sight ignited something primal inside her. Fear transformed into instinct. Protection. She grabbed a fallen branch and threw herself forward. The branch shattered instantly against steel. The assassin laughed. A cruel sound. A sound belonging to someone who already believed victory was inevitable. Snow swirled around them. The wind screamed through the trees. And Elara understood a terrible truth. She could not win. Not against trained killers. Not against men sent specifically to erase her existence. Yet she refused to move aside. The cubs remained behind her. Therefore she would stand, even if it killed her. The lead assassin advanced slowly, enjoying her fear, enjoying her desperation. His blade rose. Then everything changed. A roar exploded through the forest. Not human, not animal. Something far more terrifying. The assassin froze. Every man froze. Even the storm itself seemed to hesitate. Then darkness moved between the trees. Fast. Violent. Unstoppable. The first killer never even saw death arrive. A massive figure crashed into him. Bones shattered. Blood sprayed across white snow. Screams erupted instantly. The forest became chaos. Kalar Vane had arrived. The Alpha King looked less like a ruler and more like a nightmare given flesh. His cloak whipped behind him like black wings. Silver eyes glowed through the storm. Fury radiated from him. Pure. Ancient. Lethal. The remaining assassins attacked together. It didn't matter. Kalar tore through them with terrifying efficiency. One died beneath his sword. Another beneath his claws. A third disappeared beneath the jaws of the giant wolves racing beside him. Within moments the snowfield became silent again. Only the wind remained. Only the storm. Only death. Elara stood frozen. Unable to breathe. Unable to look away. Now she understood why entire kingdoms feared him. Why warriors whispered his name. Why enemies surrendered before battles even began. Because Kalar Vane wasn't merely powerful. He was terrifying. The king slowly turned toward her. For several seconds neither spoke. Snow drifted between them. The cubs suddenly squealed with excitement. Then they ran. Kalar's warriors smiled with relief. Surely the heirs would return to their king. Surely they would race towards safety. Instead, they sprinted directly past Kalar, past every soldier, past every healer, straight into Elara's arms. The world seemed to stop. One cub climbed onto her lap. Another buried his face against her neck. The youngest wrapped tiny arms around her waist. The silence that followed felt deafening. Kalar stared. Something unreadable flashed across his face. Pain. Shock. Confusion. Because for the first time he was forced to confront a reality nobody could explain. The cubs trusted her more than they trusted him. His warriors noticed it too. Nobody dared comment. Nobody needed to. The truth stood right in front of them. Elara slowly looked up. Their eyes met. For the first time since her exile, Kalar truly saw her. Not a servant. Not an omega. Not an accusation. Her. The exhausted girl standing in a snowstorm after risking everything to keep the cubs alive. A strange tension settled between them. Dangerous. Unexpected. Neither knew what to do with it. Kalar finally stepped closer. His voice emerged low and rough. You should be dead. Elara laughed bitterly. A sound carrying weeks of heartbreak. Many people seem disappointed that I'm not. Something shifted behind his eyes. Guilt. The realization struck harder than any battlefield wound. Because she was right. He had allowed it. Allowed the court to condemn her. Allowed Seraphine's accusations to spread. Allowed silence to become betrayal. And now she stood before him carrying the consequences. For a moment Kalar wanted to apologize. The urge shocked him. Kings did not apologize. Kings commanded. Yet the words refused to leave his throat. Because guilt had never come naturally to him. Instead he simply said, "The cubs are returning home." Alara's expression hardened instantly. And if they don't want to? The question struck deeper than intended, because neither of them were talking only about the cubs anymore. The storm continued raging around them, but neither looked away. Something invisible stretched between them, a thread neither understood, a pull neither could ignore. Then one of Kaler's trackers approached, breathing heavily, holding several papers recovered from the dead assassins. The man's face had gone pale. "Your Majesty." Kaler accepted the documents. His expression darkened. One page carried a seal. A hidden seal. Seraphine's seal. The king's heartbeat slowed. Dangerously. The assassins had not been rogue mercenaries. They had been sent, ordered, controlled. Someone inside his court wanted Alara dead. The realization changed everything. For the first time since her exile, doubt entered his mind. What if she was innocent? What if the court had lied? What if he had condemned the wrong person? The questions haunted him as night descended across the wilderness. By necessity, they made camp together. The storm prevented travel. The cubs refused separation. And fate seemed determined to keep the king and Omega trapped within the same circle of firelight. Hours later, silence filled the camp. The warriors slept. The wolves rested. Snow drifted gently through dark trees. Alara sat beside the fire, watching flames dance, watching sparks rise into darkness. Kaler sat across from her. Neither spoke, yet awareness existed between them. Constant. Dangerous. Unavoidable. The Alpha King found himself studying her when she wasn't looking. The gentle way she wrapped blankets around the cubs. The way she checked their breathing. The way exhaustion never stopped her from caring. He had seen queens show less devotion. Meanwhile, Alara noticed things too. The way Kaler remained awake long after everyone else. The shadows beneath his eyes. The grief he carried. The loneliness hidden beneath all that power. For the first time, she wondered what kind of man existed beneath the crown. Then one of the cubs stirred, whimpering from a nightmare. Instantly, Kaler moved. The fear in his eyes lasted only a second, but Alara saw it. And suddenly she understood. The king wasn't merely protecting heirs. He loved them. That realization made him seem painfully human. Dangerously human. The moment lingered. Soft. Fragile. Then hoofbeats shattered the silence. A messenger burst into camp. Breathless. Terrified. He carried a sealed document from the capital. Kaler opened it immediately. His face hardened. Then darkened. Then went completely still. Alara's stomach dropped. What happened? The king didn't answer immediately, because the paper contained something catastrophic. A confession. Signed by Alara. Admitting treason. Admitting espionage. Admitting everything. A perfect forgery. And by dawn, the entire kingdom would believe it was real. Kaler slowly looked toward the fire. Toward the woman he was beginning to trust. Toward the woman the kingdom had already condemned. And somewhere far away, Lady Seraphine smiled, because the most devastating betrayal had only just begun. By sunrise, Alara would become the most hated woman in the kingdom once again. By sunrise, the lie had become truth. Again, the kingdom woke to outrage. Market squares filled with whispers. Taverns erupted with arguments. Nobles held emergency gatherings behind closed doors. Everywhere the same story spread. The Omega had confessed. The traitor had finally admitted her crimes. The forged confession traveled faster than reason. Faster than evidence. Faster than truth itself. Inside the capital, bells rang from tower to tower while royal messengers carried copies of the document through every district. Fear was spreading exactly as Seraphine intended. Fear always moved faster than facts. And fear was easier to control. Deep inside the palace, Lady Seraphine stood before a tall mirror. Golden candlelight illuminated her perfect features. A servant nervously adjusted the sleeves of her gown. The woman was trembling. Everyone in the palace seemed to tremble around Seraphine lately. The servant finally whispered, "Your Grace, what if the king discovers the forgery?" Seraphine smiled. A cold smile. A dangerous smile. He already suspects. The servant's face drained of color. Seraphine calmly fastened a sapphire necklace around her throat. But suspicion is not proof. She turned toward the window, overlooking the city. And people rarely choose truth when lies are easier. Outside, the capital was already turning against Alara. Exactly as planned. Meanwhile, far from the city, Kaler sat alone beside a dying campfire. The forged confession rested in his hands. He had read it 7 times. Every sentence felt wrong. Every word felt artificial. Because it did not sound like Alara. And yet, the kingdom believed it. His advisors believed it. His generals believed it. The pressure was already beginning. He could feel it, like chains tightening around his throat. Across the camp, Alara watched him from the shadows. Something had changed. The previous night's fragile connection was gone. The warmth she had glimpsed behind his silver eyes had vanished. Now there was distance again. Silence again. Doubt again. Her chest ached. She hated herself for noticing. Hated herself for caring. Because caring led to disappointment. It always did. The lesson had been carved into her life since childhood. Yet despite every warning, she had begun trusting him. And now she could feel that trust slipping away. The cubs remained curled beside her, sleeping peacefully, unaware that the world around them was falling apart. Hours later, the search party resumed its journey toward the capital. Snow-covered roads stretched endlessly ahead. The atmosphere felt different now. Heavier. Colder. The soldiers whispered when they thought Alara wasn't listening. Their eyes carried suspicion, judgment, disgust. The forged confession had reached them too. Every glance became another wound. Every whisper became another reminder. She was alone again. Near sunset, the company stopped beside a frozen canyon. The wind howled through jagged cliffs. Dark clouds gathered overhead. A storm was coming. Kaler stood with his advisors overlooking the canyon. Their voices carried through the wind. Not clearly, but clearly enough. The kingdom will not accept her return. The nobles are already demanding punishment. If you defend her, your majesty, they may revolt. 1 Omega is not worth risking civil war. The final sentence struck Alara like a blade. 1 Omega. Not worth it. Not worth defending. Not worth believing. Not worth choosing. The words echoed through old wounds that had never truly healed. Across the canyon, Kaler remained silent. His advisors continued speaking, continued pushing, continued pressuring. And he did not stop them. That silence destroyed something inside her, because she had seen the evidence. She had watched him discover Seraphine's seal. She knew he doubted the accusations. Yet doubt wasn't enough. Belief required action. And Kaler wasn't acting. The realization settled heavily into her heart. When everything mattered, when choosing her carried consequences, the king would choose the kingdom instead, the same way everyone always had. That night, camp settled beneath towering cliffs. Rain began falling. Cold. Relentless. The cubs slept together beneath blankets, near the fire. Most of the soldiers had retired. Only a handful remained awake, including Kaler, including Alara. The distance between them felt enormous despite only a few feet separating them. Neither spoke. Neither moved. The silence hurt more than an argument would have. Eventually, Kaler rose from his seat. For a moment, Alara thought he might finally say something, explain something, fight for something. Instead, he turned away, returning to his command tent. The flap closed behind him. And that was enough. The final answer. The final disappointment. Tears burned behind Alara's eyes. Not because she loved him. She refused to admit that possibility. But because she had hoped. And hope was often the cruelest wound of all. Hours later, while the camp slept, Alara quietly packed her belongings. The storm concealed every sound. The rain erased tracks. The darkness became her ally. One by one, the cubs woke. Golden eyes blinked sleepily. Tiny tails wagged. They sensed something. A goodbye. A loss. A change. Alara knelt before them. Her fingers trembled as she stroked their fur. I can't stay. The words barely emerged. One cub whimpered. Another pressed against her hand. The youngest climbed into her lap. For several moments, she nearly changed her mind, nearly stayed, nearly believed. But trust had already shattered. And shattered things rarely returned whole. Fresh tears slipped down her cheeks. Then she stood and disappeared into the storm. By dawn she was gone. No guards, no chains, no sentence, only heartbreak. The camp erupted into chaos once her absence was discovered. Soldiers searched nearby forests. Trackers spread through the mountains. The cubs refused to calm down. They cried continuously, searching for the person who had become their home. And at the center of the disaster stood Kaler Vane, frozen, silent, staring at the empty place beside the fire. Something inside him knew immediately. She had not been taken. She had left. Because of him. Hours later, the truth finally arrived. A royal investigator reached the camp carrying documents recovered from one of Seraphine's secret agents. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, forged seals, hidden correspondence, witness testimony. Enough to expose the entire conspiracy. Enough to prove Alera's innocence beyond doubt. Enough to destroy Seraphine. Kaler read every page. Then read them again. A terrible realization settled over him. The accusations had been lies. The confession had been fabricated. The exile had never been justice. It had been manipulation. And he had allowed it. The guilt struck harder than any battlefield wound he had ever suffered. For the first time in years, the Alpha King felt truly ashamed. Not as a ruler, as a man. Because Alera had trusted him. And he had failed her. The storm intensified as evening approached. Thunder rolled across distant mountains. Lightning illuminated the northern horizon. Then another messenger arrived. This one looked terrified. Absolutely terrified. He carried an ancient scroll recovered from ruins near the northern territories. A prophecy. Forgotten for centuries. The old parchment trembled in Kaler's hands as he read. His blood turned cold. The prophecy spoke of 3 royal cubs, a moonblood Omega, and an Alpha King bound by fate. Together, they would either save the kingdom or watch it burn. Before Kaler could process the revelation, the messenger delivered one final piece of news. Scouts had spotted movement beyond the northern border. Not soldiers, not traitors. Something else. Something ancient. Something monstrous. And, according to the reports, those creatures were moving toward the same wilderness where Alera had vanished. Kaler slowly lifted his gaze toward the dark northern mountains. The rain poured harder. The wind screamed through the cliffs. And for the first time in many years, genuine fear gripped the Alpha King. Because Alera was alone. His enemies had found her. And fate was already moving faster than he could follow. Somewhere beyond the northern border, the exiled Omega was about to discover who she truly was. The northern wilderness felt different. Older. Wilder. As though the kingdom's laws had never reached this place. Jagged mountains pierced the clouds like the broken teeth of ancient giants. Silver rivers carved through endless forests. Strange mist drifted between trees older than recorded history. And somewhere beneath that vast, forgotten landscape, Alera Ashwin was running out of strength. For days, she had traveled alone. The rain had stopped, but the cold remained. A deep, merciless cold that settled inside bones and refused to leave. Every step felt heavier. Every breath hurt. Yet she continued forward, because there was nowhere else to go. No home waiting behind her. No future waiting ahead. Only survival. The loneliness was the worst part. Not the hunger. Not the exhaustion. Not even the danger. The silence. For weeks she had grown accustomed to the cubs. Their tiny footsteps. Their playful noises. Their warmth during cold nights. Now that warmth was gone. And the emptiness left behind felt unbearable. Especially when she remembered who else was gone. Kaler. His face haunted her thoughts. His silver eyes. His rare moments of softness. The grief hidden beneath his strength. Every memory felt like a wound. She hated that. Hated how deeply he had affected her. Because despite everything, a part of her still wanted to believe he had cared. A foolish part. A dangerous part. The same part that had always longed to belong somewhere. Suddenly a distant howl shattered the silence. Elara froze. The sound didn't belong to wolves. It was deeper, older, more powerful. Another howl answered. Then another. The forest seemed to wake around her. Shadows moved between ancient trees. Massive shapes emerged from the mist. Alara's pulse exploded. Direwolves. Enormous creatures stepped into the moonlight, each one larger than horses. Silver eyes glowed in the darkness. Ancient symbols marked their fur. Magic radiated from them. Primal. Terrifying. Beautiful. The largest wolf approached slowly. Its gaze never left her. Alara's breath caught. Instead of attacking, the creature lowered its head. As though bowing. The others followed. One after another. The entire pack knelt. The forest fell silent. The moment felt impossible. Then a voice emerged from the darkness. You have finally returned. Alara spun around. An elderly woman stepped from the trees. Long silver hair flowed down her back. Moonlight seemed woven into her robes. Ancient power surrounded her. The woman's eyes filled with emotion. Not surprise. Recognition. You know me? The woman smiled sadly. I have waited for you since the night you were born. The words sent chills down Alara's spine. And for the first time, answers began appearing. The hidden sanctuary rested deep within the mountains. A place forgotten by kingdoms. Forgotten by history. Yet not forgotten by magic. Massive stone structures stood beneath waterfalls glowing with silver light. Ancient runes illuminated pathways. The air itself felt alive. For days Alara listened, learned, remembered. The guardians revealed truths buried for generations. Truths her parents had died protecting. Truths powerful enough to reshape kingdoms. She was not merely an Omega. She was the final descendant of the Moonblood Queens. A bloodline older than kings. Older than kingdoms. Older than war. Healing flowed through her veins. Ancient magic slept beneath her skin. The same power capable of restoring life. The same power capable of awakening destiny. Every strange moment throughout her life suddenly made sense. The animals who trusted her. The wolves who followed her. The cubs who refused to leave her side. None of it had been coincidence. She had been born for something greater. And then came the final revelation. The one that shattered her remaining defenses. The dreams. The silver eyes. The mysterious presence watching her beneath blood-red moons. They belonged to Kalar, not symbolically, literally. The bond between them existed long before they met. Long before exile. Long before betrayal. Their souls had recognized each other years ago. The realization left her breathless. Because it explained everything. The tension. The pull. The impossible awareness whenever he was near. The pain she felt when he turned away. The longing she couldn't escape. Destiny had been whispering their names to each other for years. And neither had understood. Meanwhile, the kingdom was burning. Kalar Vane had become a storm. A relentless force of destruction. Every member of Seraphine's conspiracy fell. One after another. Secrets surfaced. Witnesses confessed. Forged documents emerged. Truth spread through the capital like wildfire. Public outrage shifted instantly. The people who once demanded Alara's punishment now demanded justice. Too late. Far too late. The damage had already been done. Kalar felt that truth every waking moment. He couldn't sleep. Couldn't rest. Couldn't escape the memory of her leaving. Every empty hallway reminded him of failure. Every nursery visit reminded him of loss. The cubs were miserable. They searched constantly. Whining. Waiting. Looking for the Omega, who never returned. Even they seemed to understand something the king had ignored for too long. Alara wasn't replaceable. She had become part of them. Part of him. Then disaster struck. The northern watchtowers fell first. Messengers arrived covered in blood. Entire villages vanished overnight. Monstrous creatures poured across the border. Creatures pulled from ancient nightmares. Towering beasts. Shadow-born horrors. An army unlike anything seen in centuries. Panic spread across the kingdom. Cities prepared for war. Families fled south. The end had arrived. And Kaler finally understood something terrifying. The prophecy was happening.
Now.
The capital's war council descended into chaos. Generals argued. Nobles panicked. Advisors demanded impossible solutions. Kaler ignored them all. His decision had already been made. Because every report led to the same conclusion. The kingdom could not survive alone. Not this enemy. Not this war. Not this prophecy. There was only one person capable of changing their fate. One person he had failed. One person he needed. Alara. So for the first time in years, the Alpha King abandoned his throne. Not for conquest. Not for battle. For her. 3 days later, he found the hidden sanctuary. And found her. The moment shattered him. Because she wasn't the same girl. The frightened Omega was gone. The woman standing beneath silver waterfalls looked transformed. Confident. Radiant. Powerful. Moonlight seemed to cling to her skin. Ancient runes glowed softly along her wrists. Her presence filled the entire valley. For a moment Kaler simply stared. Unable to speak. Unable to breathe. Alara looked at him. And every old wound reopened. Pain flashed through her eyes. Then anger. Then something even more dangerous. Longing. Neither spoke immediately. The silence stretched. Heavy with everything left unsaid. Finally Kaler stepped forward. I was wrong. The words sounded strange coming from him.
Raw.
Unprotected.
Real.
Alara laughed softly. Not with amusement. With heartbreak. That's all. His chest tightened.
No.
The king's voice lowered. I failed you. The confession hung between them. For the first time since they met, there was no crown between them. No court. No kingdom. Only two wounded souls standing face to face. You chose them. Her voice trembled. The nobles. The kingdom. Everyone except me. Kaler closed his eyes briefly. Because she wasn't wrong. And truth often hurt more than lies. When he opened them again, every defense was gone. I choose you now. The words landed like thunder. Alara's heart stuttered. So did his. Because neither could take them back. Neither wanted to. The air seemed to shift around them. The bond awakened. Ancient. Powerful. Unavoidable. For one dangerous moment it felt as though the world disappeared. Only them remained. Then the prophecy interrupted. The guardians revealed the final warning. The final truth. The final choice. The Alpha King. The Moonblood Queen. The 3 royal cubs. United, they could save the kingdom. Separated, the kingdom would fall. Silence followed. Heavy.
Terrifying.
Because neither doubted the prophecy anymore. Not after everything. Not after fate had dragged them together again and again. Then a horn echoed across the mountains. A scout arrived at full speed. His face was pale with terror. His horse collapsed beneath him. The man barely managed to speak. The capital. His voice broke. The enemy has reached the capital. The world seemed to stop. The outer walls will fall before sunrise. Far away, black smoke already stained the northern horizon. War had arrived. The final battle had begun. And this time, the fate of the entire kingdom rested in the hands of an exiled Omega and the Alpha King who loved her. As flames rose beyond the mountains, Alara made the choice that would change everything. The sky burned before dawn. From the highest mountain ridge, Alara could see it, a crimson glow staining the horizon. The capital, her kingdom, their kingdom, on fire. Smoke climbed into the heavens like dark serpents twisting toward the moon. The sight stole the remaining breath from her lungs. Below, thousands of people were fighting for survival. Families, children, warriors, the innocent and the guilty alike. And somewhere beyond those flames stood the woman responsible for everything. Lady Seraphine Valcrest, the architect of exile, the creator of lies, the destroyer of trust, the woman who had nearly destroyed them all. Beside Alara, Kaler stared toward the burning city. His jaw tightened. Silver eyes hardened. But something had changed. The king who once carried the weight of the kingdom alone no longer stood alone. For the first time in years, someone stood beside him. Not behind him, not beneath him, beside him. The realization brought a strange peace. One he hadn't felt since before grief had turned him into a monster. The 3 alpha cubs waited nearby. No longer frightened. No longer uncertain. Almost as though they understood their role in the story fate had written. The prophecy was moving. Every piece was falling into place. And destiny waited inside the flames. Without another word, they rode for war. The capital was dying. Massive sections of the outer walls had collapsed. Ancient towers burned. The streets echoed with screams and steel. Monstrous creatures flooded through shattered gates. Shadow-born beasts climbed rooftops. Winged horrors circled above the city. The air smelled of blood,
Ash. Fear.
and desperation. Yet through the chaos, another force moved. Kaler's army. The Alpha King's warriors surged through the streets with savage determination. Hope followed them, because their king had returned. And this time, he had not returned alone. The moment Alara crossed the city gates, something extraordinary happened. The wounded began reaching for her. Not physically, instinctively, as though every soul around her recognized something ancient, something comforting, something sacred. Moonblood energy pulsed beneath her skin. Silver light flowed across her hands. Broken bones mended. Bleeding wounds closed. Exhausted warriors rose again. The sight spread through the battlefield. People whispered, then shouted, then cried openly. The Moon Queen, the lost queen, had returned. And suddenly hope became contagious. Far above the city, inside the royal palace, Seraphine watched everything unfold. Rage consumed her. Pure rage. Years of planning. Years of manipulation. Years of obsession. All collapsing. Because of one Omega. Because of one woman Kaler refused to let go. The hatred inside Seraphine finally devoured whatever humanity remained. She turned toward an ancient altar hidden beneath the throne room. Black runes glowed across the stone. Forbidden magic. The kind of magic kings had outlawed centuries ago. The kind of magic that demanded a terrible price. For a moment hesitation flickered across her face. Then disappeared. Power mattered more than consequences. It always had. Darkness erupted from the altar. The palace shook violently. And somewhere deep beneath the kingdom, something ancient awakened. Something hungry. Something terrible. Night reached its darkest hour. The final battle began. The palace became a battlefield. Marble halls ran red with blood. Fire consumed royal banners. Ancient statues shattered. The kingdom's entire history seemed to crumble around them. At the center of the chaos stood Seraphine. No longer beautiful. No longer elegant. Dark magic had transformed her. Black veins covered her skin. Shadow twisted around her body. Her eyes glowed like burning coals. She looked less like a noblewoman and more like a nightmare. The moment Alara entered the throne room, Seraphine smiled. A horrible smile. I should have killed you years ago. The words echoed through flames. Alara stepped forward.
Calm. Steady.
Strong. The frightened Omega who once stood alone before the royal court no longer existed. That girl had died in exile. The woman standing here had been forged by pain, by loss, by destiny. You already tried. Seraphine screamed. Darkness exploded outward. The battle erupted instantly. Magic collided with magic. Light against shadow. Healing against corruption. Hope against hatred. The throne room shook beneath the force. Stone cracked. Columns collapsed. The air itself seemed ready to tear apart. Meanwhile, Kaler fought through waves of monstrous creatures flooding the palace. Every instinct focused on one thing. Alara. Protect her. Reach her. Keep her alive. The realization no longer frightened him. It no longer felt like weakness. Love was not weakness. Not anymore. The truth had cost him too much to ignore. The battle reached its breaking point. Seraphine unleashed everything. Every stolen spell. Every forbidden ritual. Every ounce of hatred. Darkness swallowed the throne room. Alara nearly collapsed beneath the pressure. Pain exploded through her body. The Moonblood power fought desperately against the corruption. For one terrible moment, darkness began winning. Then a roar shook the palace. Kalar, the Alpha King, crashed into the battle. His sword tore through shadow. His presence shattered fear itself. He stood between Alara and death, exactly where he wanted to be. Seraphine attacked immediately. A spear of black magic shot forward. Too fast. Too powerful. Impossible to stop. Kalar never hesitated. He stepped in front of Alara. The spear pierced his chest. Silence followed. Absolute silence. The world seemed to stop moving. Kalar staggered. Blood spread across his armor. His sword slipped from numb fingers. Then he fell. The Alpha King hit the floor. And did not rise. No. The word escaped Alara as a whisper. The throne room blurred. Fear consumed everything. Not fear for the kingdom. Not fear for destiny. Fear of losing him. Because somewhere along the way, despite every betrayal, every wound, every obstacle, she had fallen in love with him. The realization shattered the final barrier inside her heart. And the Moonblood power awakened completely. Silver light exploded through the palace. Brighter than fire. Brighter than moonlight. Brighter than dawn itself. Ancient symbols appeared across the walls. Across the floor. Across the throne. Across Alara's skin. The power of every moon queen before her surged forward. Generations. Centuries. An entire bloodline awakening at once. Seraphine screamed. The darkness around her began breaking apart.
Cracking.
Shattering.
Dying.
Because hatred could not survive where love became stronger than fear. With one final wave of power, Alara ended it. The shadows vanished. The corruption disappeared. And Seraphine fell. Alone.
Defeated.
Forgotten. Exactly as she had always feared. The war ended. The monsters collapsed. The invasion broke apart. Victory finally arrived. But Alara barely noticed. Because Kalar wasn't moving. The battlefield faded. The kingdom faded. Everything faded. Only Kalar remained. Alara dropped beside him. Tears streamed down her face.
His heartbeat was weak.
Dangerously weak. The wound was fatal. Every healer knew it. Every warrior knew it. Even Kalar knew it. Slowly, his silver eyes opened. They found hers immediately, as though they always would. A faint smile touched his lips. You survived. Even now. Even dying. He worried about her first. Fresh tears fell. You idiot. The words broke halfway through. Kalar chuckled weakly. Then coughed blood. The sight nearly destroyed her. His hand lifted slowly, brushing against her cheek. A final goodbye. A final touch. A final moment. Unless Alara closed her eyes.
And chose.
Not as an Omega. Not as an exile. Not as a survivor. As a queen. She released everything. Every ounce of Moonblood power. Every memory. Every piece of love inside her heart. The energy flowed into Kalar. Silver light surrounded them both. The palace trembled. The kingdom watched. And destiny completed itself. When dawn finally arrived, the war was over. Smoke drifted across a quiet city. Sunlight touched ruined towers. Birds returned to the sky. Life slowly returned. And at the center of it all stood a miracle. Kalar Vane opened his eyes. Alive. Breathing. Healed. A stunned silence spread across the crowd. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Because they had all witnessed the impossible. The feared Alpha King slowly rose to his feet. Then turned toward Alara. The woman who had saved him. The woman who had saved the kingdom. The woman they had once cast away. For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Then the king did something nobody expected. Something history would remember forever. Kalar Vane knelt. Not before a throne. Not before nobles. Not before power. Before her. The entire kingdom watched in stunned silence. His voice carried across the ruined palace. Strong.
Certain.
Filled with emotion he no longer hid. You were never meant to kneel before this kingdom. His silver eyes never left hers. You were meant to rule beside me. The The three alpha cubs rushed forward instantly, surrounding Alara, pressing against her legs, tails wagging furiously. The sight brought laughter through tears. Across the palace courtyard, thousands of people lowered their heads, not out of fear, out of respect, out of gratitude, out of love. And beneath the first sunlight of a new age, the exiled Omega became what destiny had always intended. Not a servant, not an outcast, not a victim, a queen, the Moon Queen, the Alpha King's heart, and the woman who taught an entire kingdom that the people they discard today may become the ones who save them tomorrow.
The end.